for the flow of the conversation this morning, we have a couple of key questions that we hope to address to our panelists and see where their thoughts and expertise of being walking the walk of this space for some years. Then we have a Q&A box, and we've a chat box for our audience to participate and get a conversation going around this area. We have just under the hour to try and cover as much as we can. It's our second in our master series.
So I'm a business psychologist, and I specialise in neurodiversity, which, for those of you who don't know, is usually conditions like dyslexia, ADHD, autism and Asperger's. And what we found is that the digital transformation really creates a more level playing field for people with those conditions, and the way the work environment is being shaped at the moment, it's really important that we get that right for fairness.
Thanks, Charlie. I might go to you next, Jackie.
Sure, thanks, Gráinne. So my name is Jackie Gilmore. Good afternoon, everybody. Delighted to be here. I'm a partner with EY in the area of people advisory services, and I focus on organisation transformation and talent, and to that end, the future of work. And more recently, in the last 3 to 4 months, return to work and how we're reimagining that in the wake of COVID-19 as well. So I work across financial services and the private sector, and would be delighted to share any insights and thoughts this afternoon.
Thanks, Jackie. And finally, Brian.
Good afternoon, Gráinne, and thank you, UCC. Thank you for the opportunity. It's lovely to contribute. So I work with HSBC, based out of London. Well, I would be based out of London if I could make it there. I've started actually during COVID, incidentally, so working from home. I'm looking at the future operating model for data and analytics for the HSBC business, for the commercial bank and the global bank. My background is transformation and change, and looking for how we challenge norms and challenge the status quo and drive value, and really putting the customer as a North Star and all of that. So hopefully I can contribute a few insights.
Great, Brian. Thanks a lot. And start with a first question, and maybe I could address it to you three. COVID-19 has brought a lot, and we've seen, as Jackie had just mentioned, the returning of workforce. Just a couple of months ago, we had nearly a dead stop of people exiting the workplaces and trying a whole new fit at working from home. So the question kicks off at how different do you feel the workforce and workplace of the future will be, should we say in 5 years' time? And what are some of the things we need to look out for in moving forward in the new future of work? Jackie, I might shoot with you to start with, if that's okay.
Sure, Gráinne, and thanks a lot. It's a great question, and I'm not sure everybody really has the answer to that, because there are kind of a lot of unknowns, which we've seen evidenced by the pace of acceleration that's come on the wake of COVID-19. But certainly, what we do know is that the future of work is going to be very different, and that's kind of coming from the concept to kind of realization now for many organizations. If we look at, since 2000, over 52% of Fortune 500 organizations no longer exist. We're now at over 50% global internet penetration, and we know that employees are motivated by purpose. And more recently, the new keyword of kind of biosecurity as well, and how the employees, or how employers respond to their biosecure needs and the societal impact of that for organizations as a whole. So certainly, when we look ahead, we know that in the next 10 years, there's going to be almost 500 million working additions to the working population, and they will have different needs, and there are kind of suggestions that many of those will most likely quit a role due to, say, substandard technology. So that's certainly a role to play. So I would categorize how that's going to change into 4 different buckets, and really looking at kind of what the nature of the work will be in the future, to what extent that is structured. So Brian mentioned mentioned operating model. So what does that operating model of the future look like as we move from hierarchy to network of teams? How is that work enabled? So the overlap between technology and human, and that human augmentation, and how that's best leveraged to serve businesses, societies and customers. And then finally, how that's felt. So that kind of CX, EX, that a customer experience, employee experience and employee value proposition coming into the fore, and the combination of those.
Whoa, there's a lot of new terminology already being buzzed at us this morning. And Brian, can you follow through on
Sure.
your thoughts on where you're at for? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, some of the things Jackie's already said are echoing straight away with me, and things I would be saying as well. I think probably if we wind back a little bit and kind of what journey are we on over a kind of a long period of time? And Jackie mentioned, you know, employee experience, customer experience. I think it was about 10 years ago that the penny dropped for us, that we weren't treating our customers particularly well, and the kind of customer experience came into vogue, and experiential, you know, and how you design, so with the customer in mind, and that was almost a new thing at the time. We'd lost sight of that. I think that kind of brought us into a space of employee experience, where we realized an engaged employee was going to change the dial when it came to customer experience. So seeing those two things together was part of the journey that we're on. I think where that's leading us now is into actually bringing that into a team environment, and when by team we mean multidisciplinary, where we bring our collective brain together to solve problems. So I think fundamentally, the way we go about solving our problems or opening up our opportunities is a completely different way of thinking. And we break things down, and, you know, we're all probably very familiar with the likes of Agile and working in frameworks and being design led and really thinking from the business perspective and thinking about the outcome. So I think there's a fundamental shift so it's in how we structure ourselves. It's less about what we do. We'll figure out what we do when we get ourselves in the right construct. I think in terms of sort of COVID and the impact, I don't think this is necessarily changing the direction of travel. I think we're on the same direction, but I think there's an acceleration. So the government last year issued a Future of Jobs Ireland, and they kind of forecast things for 2025 that needed to change, like low carbon, bringing more people into the workforce, embracing technology. In fact, these are all the things that just after happening in the last couple of months. So I'd argue that we've accelerated. I don't think we've necessarily changed. We're getting there a bit faster, and there's a lot of good in that, because I think that'll make our businesses more resilient and sustainable. Because there was a sustainability issue there probably in our businesses. They were fragile, and they've proven to be fragile. So we really need to apply our brains to that.
So lots of key topics there that we could hone in and spend more hours discussing in those fruitful thoughts that you've shared, Brian. Charlie, we'll just go to you for your thoughts on it.
Sure. I mean, I think Jackie's right when we say 5 years, nobody knows. I think 5 months is quite far in advance to think about. So the biggest thing from my perspective is that for a long time, as individual psychologists working in neurodiversity, we've been trying to convince managers that they could really benefit from letting some of their neurodiverse workforce work from home sometimes. And we've really battled against this idea that they might be shirking, and what COVID did was it kind of launched this international social experiment, and it would seem that we were right all along. People can work from home, and it's just fine. So I think for me, there's something about this dropping the idea of the office as such. And, you know, I think it was really important for us all to be in the office when clerks needed to refer to ledgers. But going forward, what it means is if you need quiet, then you can work at home. If you are someone who likes the zing and needs the quick fire stimulation in order to thought, then you can work on the move now. And I think, Brian, as well, it's like you say, it was all happening anyway, but we've kind of had a concentration of this because we've had to think outside of the box in terms of finding new ways of working, and COVID's just making that more. It's just important for me that we just don't go back to these old ways, because it's what we used to do. And you know, the digital transformation means that things that we're teaching in schools are already obsolete. So, you know, my first career was in education, so it pains me to say this, but, you know, we're not going to need to know how to spell. It's just not going to be relevant. So we're still teaching skills that just won't be useful. And arguably spelling isn't necessary now with the voice recognition software that we've got and text to speech. So there's something about equipping our young people as well with the flexibility for it.
And Charlie, that's bringing back a subject to me and I'm personally passionate about. Do you think that we're at all ready for that education transformation then, when you say that we're not at all ready, yet we're accelerating, and Brian is reckoning we're at 2025 and it's only 2020. So what's the bridging gap? How do we call out to our governments, to our education centres?
Well, far be it from me to advise on the national curriculum, but so I think that, you know, we're still very subject and topic based in education, and actually what we need to be doing is equipping young people with the skills and the flexibility to be ready to adopt things quicker and to change, rather than you know, quizzing them on history and geography, which are lovely subjects. I'm not against history and geography, but you know, in what reality are our kids learning algebra but not about pensions? That's really weird, I think. So
absolutely. Jackie, have you any final thoughts before we move on? And Jackie's
no, I certainly kind of share kind of what Brian and Charlie have stated, and also kind of when it comes to education and learning, and you know, the half of life skills, and I suppose the fact that an engineering degree is, or the suggestion that an engineering degree is only kind of valid for 18 months now, just such as the pace of acceleration. I think there's again, kind of in the wake of COVID as well, this is coming more into focus, that there's certainly a requirement, more of a requirement or an obligation on behalf of the employer to look at how they're tooling and skilling up kind of their workforce, and ensuring that that cycle of learning continues over time. So what I certainly would say is that there's an opportunity to look at ensuring that there's greater levels of experiential learning kind of in an organization, combined with mentoring and reverse mentoring, and then also kind of on the job learning, and you know, through the accountabilities of their own job profile as well. And it's the combination of those three, and working in this, also leveraging some of the e-learning tools, which will hopefully ensure that individuals will remain relevant and continue to kind of build their knowledge and their skill set, and can contribute to the organizations.
Great, Jackie, thank you. And Brian?
Well, without repeating some of those really good comments, I mean, I think it's really about behaviors now, and it's about, you know, fostering the skills that help people adapt to new situations. They, you know, apply themselves in different ways, and bring unique talents, you know, bring unique perspectives to play, and developing a culture where people actually can speak up. You know, the ideas can come from anywhere genuinely. And then the whole, you know, the idea of failing fast, it's almost a little bit cliche at this stage, but you know, it's important that you're trying things and experimenting, and you're breaking things down into very small and iterating and continuously learning and getting that feedback loop, and then only pushing ahead when the conditions are right, and then scaling really fast and being able to hit the market. And so these are the things, and that's a different set of, you know, that's a whole different set of skills for people that they and ideally people who are coming from sort of a technical engineering background, if we can kind of fuse some of those skills together and get that questioning, critical thinking mindset into people, it's going to be powerful, you know, applied on top of some technical skills.
Great, Brian, thank you. Let's follow through. I'm just seeing on one of the comments, we're tweeting away, should I say, follow hashtag DTFOW, the future of work. Along to our next question. What will be the long-term impact of COVID-19 on employees, workplaces, and workforces? And what was the most unusual insight or lesson you have learned over the past few months about digital transformation? And let me see who'd like to take that. Maybe Jackie.
So it's, I think we're I think we're still learning in terms of the long-term impact on employees, because like that, we're still in an evolving situation, and we don't know as to what extent there will be a resurgence, and the extent to which that will have an impact on individuals kind of in the long term. However, there are a couple of things that that we have seen on a sector agnostic basis, and come more and more into the fore in the last couple of months. And I suppose kind of what we've seen is that we are adaptable, so in the space of a week, the amount of people who've moved over to whatever platform you choose, either be it Zoom, Teams, WebEx, or otherwise. So we have been able to adapt very quickly to new technologies and work effectively and productively in that remote environment. There are we would have some insight to suggest that 60% of individuals working remotely from home still feel they're as productive as they would have been if they were working in the office. And we're seeing some kind of really interesting kind of decisions being taken by other organizations, like the likes of Tata Consulting Services in India, who've mandated that all of their employees will work remotely from home, because it delivers, here's another buzzword, Gráinne, but a productivity velocity quotient of 25%. So they're saying that there's this sustained kind of uplift in productivity. Certainly kind of we're seeing that very much in evidence. And then also I think there's a greater level of focus on employee well-being and work-life balance. So prior to COVID-19 coming into effect, when we look at the future structure of the organization in terms of the organizational design and spans of layers, the impact of technology would have reduced the requirement for, say, finance teams, administration teams, customer service teams. But conversely, it would have seen an increase or an expansion of the C-suite and also and well-being. So that's now been amplified even further, and it's also posing some really important questions for leaders in their organizations around what is the long-term value that they are going to hold themselves to account for beyond the key financial levers of the P&L. And how are they kind of realizing that throughout the organization and in the market. So they would be kind of just some of the early insights on the impact on employees.
And do you think, Jackie, that a whole new area of training, do you feel that many companies are ready for this, that they have the training and the intelligence in-house to deliver this upspeed and transformation, or do you think that's a new form that we'll have to move to in getting them ready or getting them digitally enabled, if you like?
I think most of the organizations, most kind of large scale enterprise blue chip organizations would have learning management systems in place, and it's a case of evolving or building on them. But we're also talking about the development of soft skills, and that becoming more important. And those soft skills, as I keep saying, being the hard skills now as we go forward. And quite often, like we see kind of middle management layers, who I refer to as the forgotten middle, because they don't necessarily kind of benefit kind of a full kind of suite or glide path of learning development or leadership development programs. And now, as a result of COVID-19, more than ever, I believe it's really important for organizations and their leaders to have those soft skills, to invest in their management, and then so as they can have very candid conversations on a one-to-one basis with employees who might be coming back to work, and to understand their intrinsic motivations and how best to respond to them and create the conditions that are successful to enable them to work productively and feel safe and secure.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Jackie. Brian.
So I suppose location of work is become a question now. We were always suspicious about working from home, and I think that we've slayed that dragon. I think Charlie already mentioned that, but I think it's probably worth thinking about for the future. Where we are really has to be dictated by what we're trying to achieve. And again, Charlie did mention, wherever you have that, whatever that right space is. I'd contend that home is part of a hybrid model. home suits, obviously at home it suits a work-life balance, and there's other benefits to it, but it's probably very, very good for concentrated work. It's probably very good for productivity, as we're going to discover. But then let's not forget probably the benefit of what the office, the community. So it's about understanding where we get benefit in different ways. And the office is about probably sharing knowledge, about passing knowledge to younger colleagues, about creating some sort of level of community and social interaction, about forming those connections and kind of resetting and all. I'd offer something else to the mix here. I'd call it a third space. What's your creative space? It mightn't be one of those two things, because I think in a world where we're becoming more connected through ecosystems and we're collaborating more, there's potentially a third space. It doesn't necessarily need to be a particular place, but it may be a customer location or a partner location or a satellite office or a coffee shop or whatever it happens to be. But I think people need to think about that in the mix. Where do I create best? Where am I at my best? And allocate a certain amount of time to that. Just as sort of in terms of the longer term, I've got some research here. There's a HSBC has issued something yesterday. It's on the website, actually. You can download it. It's resilience, building back better, and it's a feedback from March, April period of this year from 2,600 customers about how they're feeling on COVID. And it reads very interestingly in terms of the long-term impacts is tech and sustainability need to be ingrained more into how companies operate, resilience. But something that's coming to the top, which is very interesting, is that customers of HSBC feel more connected to their customers, 82%, to their employees, 83%, and to strategic partners, 80%. So there is definitely, this has bonded, ecosystems, supply chains, call it what you will. I had an anecdote yesterday from somebody I was working with in another company, and I asked him, I said, business must be difficult or constrained, or major services provider. He said it's incredible the empathy that has been developed with their customers. So it's, people, because everybody's in this together. So in terms of the long term, maybe there's some, as well as the structural things around sustainability and resilience, maybe there's an empathy factor here. Maybe there's a closeness here and a reimagining as to about the way we need to go forward. So I'd like to think that there's a very strong byproduct coming, but all to be seen, I suppose, over time.
All very positive, Brian. Thanks for that. And Charlie, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's quite a specific thing for me. So as I mentioned, my area of specialism is neurodiversity, and I guess the easiest way of explaining that is that some people have greater strengths and weaknesses across their cognitive profile. And I personally go in, diagnose and make recommendations to help with weaker areas, and then we make sure that people with specific strengths are in the right jobs. They can be lifelong conditions, but we also talk about acquired neurodiversity. So let's say, for argument's sake, that someone is undergoing chemotherapy. We might find that whilst they're on treatment, their working memory isn't as strong as it would be normally, or they might not process as quickly. And what we're finding with COVID is people are having longer term problems with working memory and processing speed. And we just don't know what the implication is of that yet. So we don't know, of all of the people who have had COVID, it would seem that some people keep getting recurring symptoms. They're very tired, they feel better, and then they get worse again. I actually have a colleague who tested positive for the first test and the second test, then tested negative, and then tested positive again on the fourth test. And it's really concerning because obviously we don't know what implications there are going forward, but what we do know is that some colleagues will need extra support. Of course, that's going to have an impact on teams, and the most important thing is that we talk about it and it doesn't become one of those things that we just make quiet and go away, because it's going to put disproportionate amount of stress on certain people. So very specific answer to your question, but it's quite an important thing, I think.
Absolutely, Charlie, and thanks for that. And I suppose often that's not really spoken about? Is it a layer underneath the carpet that seems to be pushed away, or not consciously, maybe subconsciously we are dealing with it, but it's over here, and we have support mechanisms, but yet in forums like this it's great to have it and have you on board today to address that, and to make it a very key point of going forward that there's lots of employees and employers out there that are in such new territory of something that is not just the winter flu. This is something that may have recurring effects, and where is that going to impact the progression of employees, etc., in work, not to mention their mental state should they return to the office and not. So indeed, lots of food for thought, and a very great area that lots more of support needs to come. I'd imagine that both in the UK and Ireland. So hopefully we can learn from your intelligence in that space. I've just received 2 questions, and the first one is a little lengthy, so bear with me, and I'd appreciate if there's hands up who wants to tackle it. But Alan, thanks for sharing. Facebook announced in May that up to half its workforce is likely to be working from home within the next 5 to 10 years. There is one caveat: staff salaries could be adjusted to align with the cost of living in their chosen location, meaning potential pay cuts for those considering moving away from its expensive Palo Alto and other global hubs like Dublin. Does this mean there potentially will be a job drain out of Ireland to lower cost economies? I might let that sink in for a couple of seconds.
I think definitely. I would say that's you know, that makes a lot of sense for me. You know, in terms of if we continue on the track of when I spoke earlier about, you know, employee engagement and really engaged employees and people being at their best and in their most uncomfortable environment, and what's happening this, you know, incorporating your home wherever your home is into the whole equation seems to be a logical next step. So you would expect where people are flocking to the city and to the jobs. I mean, cities, I suppose, are under threat as well. In this, there's a lot of, you know, evidence or anecdotal evidence at this point that cities could suffer. You know, we didn't think that was going to happen. Nobody would have forecast that. So, needing to be in the city at the hub in a location doesn't seem like it's as important as it was 12 months ago. So, and I could see why people would look to reduce their salary and have a better way of life and a cheaper way of life and a home working environment. So I think I think we'd have to take that as a threat in terms of our workforce for the future, particularly with particular types of skill sets that lend themselves to being remote anyway, which are a lot of key skills that we're going to need. And in my own area, we're looking at that very intensively, where our skills are going to come from.
Okay, thanks for that, Brian. Jackie, have you any thoughts?
I'd share Brian's perspective on that question. I'd probably also add to say that I think that this is a much bigger, it's one of the big hairy kind of challenges that are coming from a socio-political perspective as well. So, you know, to what extent does the employer, if we consider that we've got kind of a number of US multinationals in Ireland, and say if we take kind of one of the top 3, and over 80% of their workforce are non-nationals, many of whom have returned to their home jurisdiction and are now working from home. There is a question around employers' liability and where that starts and stops, and at what point will that overtake the, you know, apparent benevolence, the current benevolence of those organisations. So what does that mean then effectively from a cost and also from a taxation perspective for those organisations operating here in Ireland? And that's a hot topic, and it's one for government. And so that person hit the nail on the head.
So thanks for that, Jackie. Absolutely. So maybe not just a job drain, but a whole bunch of economic factors and legal factors and you know, employees to look out for that and seek good advice and before they go forward. Absolutely. Charlie, will you have that effect in the UK, or are more people coming home to Ireland?
Good grief, the idea of being paid less depending on geographical location, I'm not sure I can get on with that. And you know, I guess what also comes up for me is, you know, where do you draw the line there? So are we also going to, do you know, one of the things that concerns me the most about the digital transformation is this obsession over seeing when people are logged on. So I shall not name and shame any large companies, but it would seem that as a matter of just general process, it states how long people are logged on for, when they've logged in, when they've logged off. And what that doesn't tell you is whether they've actually done any real work. And so for me, it's actually about judging people by their output and not on their input. And geographic location. Oh, that's a hot topic, isn't it? You know, so London waiting, fine. And we don't really want people to be in the city. So we're going to penalise them financially for getting out of the cities. That seems odd to me, but maybe I don't know enough about life in Dublin to say any more about that.
We look forward to welcome you as the first key invitation, or better still to Cork. Okay, guys, I have another question in from Eric. The substantial increase in virtual remote working has accelerated quickly, but what was withholding companies earlier to experiment and accelerate her? Brian, you've talked a lot about accelerating. Will I hit you with that one? Yeah.
Fine. Well, I mean, technology was definitely a constraint. I mean, it's probably surprised us all how technology was just ready for this. I'm not sure 12 months ago, even we would have been able to flex to do what we've done. So I do think, and kind of echoing Charlie's last comment there about, you know, are you online? Presenteeism and old-fashioned mentalities towards has definitely been, there's been a huge suspicion to home working, you know, that you couldn't actually contribute and be productive. And I think so. I probably just some, and maybe we just haven't advanced our whole discussion about what work is. You know, it's changed. It's dramatically changed. Digital transformation, the digital lab will tell us this. But the way we're now looking at the future of our businesses is we're kind of assembling them in very small parts. We're using, you know, microservices and APIs, and we're breaking it down and we're building it up, and it's more organic. So it's a different type of work, is a different type of thing. So I just don't think we had brought our thinking forward enough. We were still in that ritual of getting in our cars and going to the office and then figuring out what we're going to do. So it probably needed that bigger debate, and this is the catalyst, I perhaps, for that.
Jackie, you're nodding there graciously.
Yeah, no, I would, when I look at it, I actually think that a lot of it is down to kind of behaviors. And, you know, when I look at, you know, why change programs, you know, and large scale transformation programs change kind of over, it's quite a significant percentage of that is down to corporate disobedience and also maybe kind of a lack of kind of change management and behavioral change to support that. So I think in this instance, kind of what we've seen is that a unifying common goal, you know, so there's a burning platform there globally that nobody could challenge, you know, for the want of kind of keeping economies, people, and life going during this period. And so therefore I think that kind of really kind of did away with that corporate disobedience, and even, you know, you could see that kind of very much in practice at a local Irish level, because I suppose we were at once the kind of pandemic ensued, we were still at a point where our own government was in formation talks, and who would have thought that we would have seen this, you know, a very kind of different government that we have now 6 months ago. So I think kind of that has all helped. That burning platform, it's done away with the corporate disobedience, and it's also encouraged organisations where they may not have trusted their employees to work remotely in the past and be productive and kind of doing all the right things. It's forced that, and then in doing so, they've kind of seen that people can be productive, and it's built up that environment of psychological trust as well.
Great, thanks, Jackie. Absolutely, and I think the trust factor is something that it was there, I suppose. Did it need to be tested? You know, and then was it driven into exponential testing overnight when one has no choice? You've got to go with it, and lots of learnings from that space. Charlie, have you anything to add?
Just that if anybody on this webinar is interested in how to get around that system, apparently you can download an app called Jiggle My Mouse. So it looks like you're constantly active.
Love it. Charlie, thanks for that. We might post it, indeed. Always good. Guys, I'll move on to one of our third questions. How can digital transformation play a positive role in promoting diversity, inclusivity, and equitability? Charlie, there's the big smile of the day. You couldn't wait to get in on that.
This area, let's go. So I guess kind of, as I've already said, the big losers will be the people that aren't given that flexibility. So the people who still need to commute into work, the people who have to be in the office, open plan offices in particular, so difficult to work in that kind of environment. And I think there's also something about the power with a little p, the obligation of certain people who will have to go on public transport and they might not want to, but in order to stay in employment, they will. How well are organisations dealing with it? And I think it depends. It depends on the organisation and it depends on openness. But the digital transformation is the big leveller here. So I think that the most important thing is that employers need to ensure that their employees have the tools to actually learn how to use some of these digital digital tools, for want of a word, because it's all very well equipping people with things, but if they're not shown properly how to use it, it's a bit like being given the car to the Ferrari when you've never driven before, and we can't assume that everybody's just going to plug and go.
Great, thanks, Charlie. Jackie?
No, I'd agree with Charlie. I think that the organisations who are going to lose are those who don't adapt. So and adapt quickly. That's for sure. And you know, even if when we consider, you know, all of the various kind of research that's out there on, you know, on how many kind of jobs will be lost and kind of replaced with, you know, with machines, there's a lot of conjecture out there. But I mean, based on our research, we've seen that, you know, let's say in EY, New Zealand and Australia, that 11% of kind of the jobs that would be retired or jettisoned would be kind of replaced by 13% kind of more kind of roles or more jobs, but they would be in very different areas. And I think it's incumbent on organisations to really look at the diversity of skills and kind of diversity of capabilities, and really kind of zoning in on kind of some key competencies that may not have been given the same attention as might have been a number of years ago, such as the appreciation of intercultural nuance, intercultural kind of appreciation, data visualization, active learning, team working, critical thinking, statistical reasoning, all of those type of areas. So I think that you know, if the organizations who embrace that and then kind of really kind of interweave and stitch that into their functions, their businesses, will do well. And in terms of how, you know, this digital transformation will play a positive role, I think if anything it's shown is that you know, it's allowed increase in flexibility, and no one size fits all. That's something that we know for sure. So the flexibility wins hands down. And that kind of, in doing so as well, that will encourage any type of invisible barriers around engaging different parts of talent in the workforce to be overcome. So those individuals who might have caring needs themselves at home, or those individuals who can't pay rent in certain capitals in Europe, so therefore they've kind of ruled themselves out of the running for a role. They all of a sudden they're back in the frame for that. So I think that that's also a contributing factor.
Absolutely. And interesting, I've recently worked with some graduates from both UCC and CIT here in Cork, and their idea of working from home, you know, in 2020, I'm sure when they started out 4 years ago, was never an intention. Their intention was to get out of home and do their college. They were fortunate to stay at home. For many of them, they could stay at home. And now, you know, when I'm sitting with them or Zooming with them, and they're thinking, the only place is remaining at home. Fine. Thank you.
Maybe just one or two points I'd add to that. In terms of the losers, companies that and individuals, I suppose, who don't work at enough pace is very important. I think what we've proven here in the last period of time is would have taken enormous change programs to get everybody working on new technology platforms, but it just happened through osmosis over the last couple of months. Needs must, which proves the point. You know, that people just, it's a mindset thing and as much. So I think pace is now a huge factor in everything we do. Second thing I'd say is disrupting ourselves, and automation was mentioned there, but it's very important. I mean, that's the efficiency and the sustainability of our business, to get them as lean and mean. So disrupt yourself and disrupt ourselves and get out of your silos. I mean, there's still silos in organizations, and you know, looking at the politics and the right thing is the right thing. We need to get above our silos and make good sound decisions based upon design and architecture. Last point I'd say is companies that don't embrace an ecosystem. You know, there's so much power outside your own door. You need people. You need people who are engaged in orchestrating an ecosystem, so that you know how to tap into it. You know how to use it. You know how to partner with it. So you find effective ways of partnering in all different modes. There's many different ways you can do this. But I think that'll be a limiting factor if people stay within their own four walls and don't embrace the opportunity that's out there.
Great, Brian, absolutely. So it's all about embracing and moving forward and stop, I suppose, slowing down what we did in the past. It's all about creativity and critical thinking, design thinking, you know, get this into the boardroom and get them out into spaces. I loved that creative space you mentioned earlier, Brian. Asking, a lot of emphasis is being placed on the transition to digital in the workplace and how changes which are being made now will probably endure long term. What about the third level education space? And what would you say that the benefits being felt in the corporate world would be transferable to third level? Don't be shy, guys.
I think maybe if I just, I suppose you mentioned earlier there, Gráinne, that, you know, around kind of graduates and, you know, the graduate program, from an EY perspective, the graduate program is really important to us. And, you know, for the first year, kind of in many, we've been kind of challenged with our summer internship program, which is just taken place over the last 2 weeks to really kind of make that kind of meaningful within a virtual environment. And one of the things that we're speaking to third level institutions on is around where we have a focus on digital transformation, on emerging technologies, on data analytics, intelligent automation, and kind of going up that spectrum to cognitive and beyond. That's a real opportunity for us to kind of partner and work with universities on their particular kind of business programs to kind of bring that to life. So and by that, what I mean is just bringing, by way of looking at, say, a proof of concepts, or by way of looking at kind of what our co-creation innovation hubs look like, and how we can kind of how we can showcase and demonstrate maybe some of the technology tooling and ideation and methodologies around kind of getting to a point where you can come up with a really fantastic solution, either kind of a technology solution or otherwise. And to that end, like, there's some of those co-creation, the EY kind of co-creation kind of labs called a wave space, and I think that's a real opportunity to look at, take those tooling approaches, methods, and plug them in, or certainly share them and share that knowledge, and kind of bring kind of some of the those kind of EY technology leaders or others into the third level kind of institutions, so so that students can kind of really get a bird's eye view of what that looks like in practice and what they can expect.
And just finally, we have a question from Natalie. My question was, what about the other side of the spectrum? Employees that are happy and in fact we're looking forward to return back to the office for the social aspect of work and team building. Do you feel that these voices are a minority?
I don't mind taking that briefly.
Great, Charlie, thanks.
I don't know that they're a minority because I can't give you the data to back that up. But what I would say is a lot of people actually need the stimulation purely on dopamine levels. And for some people, it's essential. So if you have ADHD, then it's quite often accompanied by a lack of dopamine. And yes, absolutely, there'll be people who are dismayed that we're not returning back to the office. And that there's got to be something about meeting everybody's needs in that. So yeah, Zoom fatigue is quite a big problem, I think, but it's making sure that we get the balance so that people who do need that interaction can have that in various formats, but it doesn't exclude people who need to be home-based as well.
What would your three messages be from this morning's chat and interactive? We've brought you together, you've met and shared quite a lot of content in the short term. What would you be saying to all our viewers and those indeed who are looking forward to listening to our recording? Brian.
I think the digital transformation journey that we've been on for a number of years, I think we just need to stay the course on that. This doesn't change it. It just brings it into sharper and sharper focus, and probably changes it to a degree. But it's still the same. We still have the same imperative to really look hard at our businesses and make sure that they're sustainable and make the changes that we need to make. That's as one. I suppose. I think two is the people who work in our businesses and the people who are connected, whether they don't work for us directly or work with us in a partnership, I think we need to create the environment for everybody to be successful, and that's really about empowerment. So I really like the idea of moving to a sort of meritocracy where we're looking at the work where it's coming towards us. We're applying a critical lens to it, and then we're giving a level of autonomy that's moving away from the hierarchical systems of our businesses to move ahead and prove yourself and deliver value and be accountable to value as articulated by our business and allow a bit of, and failure is part of that. So I think empowerment, I think if we really need to focus hard on how we're setting ourselves up.
Brian, not to cut you there, but I'll let Jackie enjoy. Well, I am cutting you. The time
That's
is
fine.
ticking.
I was done.
Jackie, I'm probably down to one tip at this stage. And
Sure.
guys, when you're thinking, Brian, you might shoot up your contact details if panelists want to contact you directly. We're getting loads of great vibe there from chat and Q&A. Jackie.
Thanks, Gráinne. I'd say just to be aware of the changing nature of the workforce ecosystem. So, and really kind of how kind of the gig economy is now kind of amplified to kind of freelancers, contractors, full-time workers or otherwise, and kind of the roles that kind of technology will play going forward around and how we can kind of leverage that for the greater good longer term, i.e. telemedicine, for example. And then I'd also say just culture, and so connecting through purpose and engagement. So kind of maintaining engagement, connecting through purpose and maintaining culture over the long term.
Super, Jackie, thanks. And Charlie, last but not least, go for it.
Just briefly, don't assume that your colleagues' experience is the same as your own, and also don't assume that just because you give somebody access to digital tools that they know how to use them.
Fantastic, guys, thanks so much. I'm conscious the contact details are going up. The conversation will hopefully flow on Twitter. The DT Lab UCC can be found on Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn. Join the conversation, guys, don't stop. Watch out for our August event. Thank you so much, Brian, Jackie and Charlie, for taking your time out and sharing your insights today. And we look forward to future collaboration, and we won't say goodbye and the story is ended, only to continue. And indeed, thanks to all my team at DT Lab at UCC, Paddy, our chairman, the lads for answering the questions, and indeed the Cubs, the University Business School College for supporting us in our events, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks, and stay safe, and look forward to keeping the conversation going. DT Lab UCC.
Thanks, Gráinne.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks,
everybody.
guys.
Thank you.